Hi, this is Catharine, and I'm an out boss.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on this week's episode, we are welcoming Catharine Clarenbach from our home base here in Portland, Oregon. So, Catharine, are you ready to inspire fellow Out Bosses?
I am so ready to inspire our out bosses.
Yes, I love it. I'm super excited to welcome you to the show, Catharine. And you are a reverend, an ordained.
I am?
Yeah, you're an ordained minister with her Master's of Divinity from Wesley Theological Seminary. And you're also a creator of The Way of the River, which is a solopreneur ministry designed to help people more fully connect with their own deepest, wisest selves. I love that.
Me too.
Yeah, good. Passion and purpose, right? So,
Yeah.
So I am very, very curious to learn a little bit more about your business. And clearly it's unique, but just tell us what you do and inspire us. We're ready.
Okay. Well, as I said, and as you said, I really, in all of my work, connect with folks to help them, people who believe in God or the divine or the sacred or however you might want to put that. We work together to have a deeper awareness of that relationship. But I also work with people who don't have that kind of belief. And everybody has a deep, wise self. And so I do what's called spiritual accompaniment. It's also called spiritual direction, but I don't do any directing, so I don't call it that. Where I companion clients. We meet once a month and we work together, and I listen to them and work with them around how are they accessing, what are their practices that they do to access their own deep, wise selves. And I also offer seasonal classes around the pagan wheel of the year. So some of you may recognize the holidays of Beltane or Samhain in May and October. And I do lots of other stuff, but it's all really designed to help work with people around, like, what are their big questions? What do they want from life? What are they yearning for? Yearning is a huge part of what I do.
This is really, really interesting. And I'm curious around companion clients. Would you consider that kind of like a form of coaching? Are you working with people one-on-one, or are you matching clients that you're working with to work together? I'm just curious. I've never heard that before.
Okay. Spiritual direction is its own actual profession. You have to become certified to do it. And it's one-on-one. I work with somebody individually, and we might talk about, like, what are your spiritual practices and how have they been working for you? Have you been meditating, or are you having a hard time with that? And what's getting in the way? And what are you bringing today? Like, what is the story that you're bringing today about what your heart has to say?
I like that. One of the things that resonated with me is that you said that everyone has a deeper, a wiser self, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're working with people who are from probably many different faith traditions, is that right? And
Absolutely, yes.
And are you also
Yes.
working with people who would identify as maybe non-believers and atheists? Is that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's great, because I just wanted to kind of like throw that in there, because I'm sure there's some people who are listening that are tuning in like, well, I don't know if this podcast is for me. We're talking about God. So anyway, so that's really fascinating. And I'm sure, the work that you're doing just seems like kind of like a big tent approach, where you're welcoming people to come in and explore who they are in the world and get more clarity around what their purpose is. And all of that sounds really exciting. I'm curious right now, what has you most inspired in the business that you're doing today?
Oh my goodness. There's a couple of things. One is that I also work with a group of people who are becoming credentialed to become Unitarian Universalist ministers like me. And there is a very rigorous, almost brutal process to go through to get there. And I do coaching with them. And that is like a hybrid between vocational career coaching and spiritual accompaniment. We get to work on, like, how is your writing? Like, what is I help people write essays, and I also help people learn to see themselves honestly and how to reduce their anxiety, because one of the things that they're doing is going in front of a panel and trying to show that they are ready to be ordained as a minister.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love to see these folks because they have put years of heart and soul into this mission. And that commitment that people already have is what I really look for in an ideal client. An ideal client for me is somebody who already knows that they have a need for a deepening or a honing of their spiritual life, either in the context of this credentialing process or in a larger context in their own spiritual practice, however that looks.
Yeah. And I love that you have clarity around who your ideal client is, and you're putting
So
that out there, and that you're blending, this kind of the business side, the career side with, the spiritual component that we as humans have. So I think that's really interesting. So have you been doing this work for your entire career, or were you doing something before you started your own business?
I've been doing spiritual direction or spiritual accompaniment sort of as a side gig for like 15 years. But I was actually a fundraiser and an event planner in Washington, D.C. before I went to seminary. And I ran $500,000 events at the Kennedy Center.
Wow.
It was a whole different world.
Yeah. I used to live in DC, so that's a very different.
Yeah.
Some might be a little bit disconnected from their spiritual journey or purpose. So, right?
Yeah. Well, and what was interesting about that, though, is that I learned how to design a budget and stick to a budget, how to raise money, how to price things. I learned a lot of things that I didn't even know I was learning that would translate into my business ministry later.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, and the fact that I think one thing that you shared is that you were doing your spiritual work and really kind of laying the groundwork for your business now for 15 years while you were doing the DC thing, organizing events, raising money, doing all of that work. And that one kind of fed the other and also helped you gain the skills, right? And so just on that, your origin story of finally saying, okay, I have 15 years of doing, what I really want to do full time, this experience of a side hustle, quote unquote, and now I'm ready. Like, what was that moment? What sparked the moment for you to kind of like leave DC? I don't know if you moved to Portland right away, but you're now in Portland, Oregon. So obviously very different. Tell us about that journey.
Well, one of the main reason that I moved to Portland was actually part of my credentialing journey. I had to do an internship at a congregation. And so I became an intern minister with a large congregation in Portland. And then my wife and I loved it so much that we were like, we are so not going anywhere. And one of the things that's just true for entrepreneurial ministers and other kinds of folks is that, I had been writing a blog for years. Then I started having a newsletter. Then I got a Facebook group, right? So I built this group of folks who were receiving a lot of free content from me first. And I'm lucky because my wife has a salary that means that I can do this work and do it. I work only about 25 to 30 hours a week.
I mean, you're building it the way that you want to, right? That's part of living the dream. And I love what you're saying too about, and this applies to folks running their own businesses, is putting out your content. It's almost like showing a window of your business where you're not expecting to get money, right? Like when you're writing your blog, you're writing about things that you love that are related to the work that you do. And it's giving people a flavor of like, hey, this is what I know. Hopefully it's inspiring you. Hopefully you're learning something new, and you're bringing them in and you're building that audience. when you said you had a blog for years, and then you moved to the newsletter space, and probably still doing the blog, right? And then you opened a Facebook group. What was that? Because I talk with a lot of people, and I do a little bit of coaching myself, and folks are like, we need to build an audience. We need to have like 500 people by tomorrow. And it's like, oh, it doesn't work. Maybe for some people it works like that magically, right? But it's persistence and grit and all of that good stuff. Can you tell us just a little bit about how you grew your audience, and like realistically, how did those numbers increase over time? What did that look like?
I emailed my friends directly and said, here's my blog. I'm going to be sending out a regular newsletter. I write every single Monday, and I have now for almost 3 years. Well, I write on Wednesdays, and it goes out on Mondays. I really think you'd be interested in this. It was very organic for me. I started with 25 people. And I was just writing to those 25 people, but I was writing what I knew I needed to write about, what I needed to hear, what I was yearning for, and that I was going to get more people as time went on. And things look different now on Facebook than they did when I did this. But I got a Facebook page and did a lot of work with my Facebook page. Facebook is messing around with that now. But
they change something every day.
They do. It's really frustrating. And I got to about 400 clients, or not 400 clients, good Lord, 400 people on my list pretty much totally organically.
Yeah.
By writing my butt off. I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. I wrote blogs. I wrote guest blogs. I worked for Pathos. I write for the Pagan Square blog. I write these newsletters. I invite people to invite people. And I also did, and I do this twice a year, I send out a questionnaire to my folks about where are you in your journey right now? And I have 6 spaces for a free hour with me to do a consultation about sort of where you are and what you're looking for. And people respond, and then I pick 6 people and we do those consultations, and some of those folks turn into ongoing clients, and some of them are just people that I have an even deeper relationship with. I'm an extremely relationship-oriented person. So there was a lot of one-on-one grit and persistence, as you said, really reaching out to people in other Facebook groups that I belong to and taking advantage of things like Facebook business groups that I really believe in that have the opportunity to promote your work.
Right.
And that actually do that.
Right.
That where they're actually, people are engaging with it.
I think that this is great advice. I mean, just in how you built your own audience and really emphasizing the importance of relationships. And I think sometimes some of us, it's sometimes easier just to kind of do the Facebook ad, blast it to our ideal quote unquote customers or clients, and be done with it. And I think that's what everyone is doing, kind of in the online space. And you're giving us some good advice around how to differentiate and stand out by just providing that great content that you're talking about, and getting to know the people that are a part of your Facebook group or however you're engaging online, which is really, really valuable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Facebook ads, Facebook ads are not worth nothing. Sure. But I haven't done Facebook ads until 2.5 years into my business.
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't spent money doing that because I had real success in an organic process.
Yeah. And I think it's definitely a both-and approach. And we're just getting started in talking about your business, right? And part of this show is that, this is the Out Entrepreneur. And so part of business on the show is that we talk about what brings us to the Rainbow family. And really some of the, well, definitely, all around empowerment. But I like to start and really kind of dig into some of the challenges, right, that show up, even though it's 2018. It's a different time than it was even a couple of years ago to be LGBT in the United States or in the world. And I'm curious, whether, this could be from your experience of working in DC for someone else or even in your own business. If there was a time that was difficult for you to bring your whole self to work, meaning that, to talk about your partner, your family, to talk about the fact that you're LGBT, whatever that might be, does a particular incident come to mind where you had to kind of, I don't know, censor some parts of your life in order just to kind of get through a business transaction without drawing a lot of attention to yourself or just, engaging in a political conversation that you didn't really want to talk about because you just want to do business? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah. Well, first I should say I came out when I was 17 in 1991.
Okay, that's before Ellen coming out on TV. So just for context for anybody, well, I'm sure there's some millennials who are like, who is Ellen? Hopefully not. But it was a different time, right? Like I think
it was a different time. Yeah. And I was working with people who were living with HIV and AIDS before the cocktails came out, and they were dying all around me. Right. My friends were dying all around me. And so my context of coming out is extremely different from the context of folks coming out now. Not better, not worse, just really different. And I burned the door down, right?
Yes,
the closet door was gone. Yeah. But many, many years later, I was doing what's called CPE, and it's clinical pastoral education. It's basically chaplaincy training that you go through as a minister.
Okay.
Which meant that I was working in a retirement and assisted living and skilled nursing facility. And I just didn't know, I was working with people from the ages of about 65 to 102.
Wow.
And I am a fat femme. So there was already a lot of conversation around my size.
Right.
Among the people I was working with, the residents I was working with. And I had never encountered in my life, honest to God, I had never encountered in my life a time where I felt like, it's just not worth it. Mm-hmm. It's just not worth it to get into it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to, except for with one resident. He happened to mention, so to speak, Harvey Milk to me in one of our first meetings together.
Yeah.
And it was like that code.
Yes.
That code. And I said, wow, were you in San Francisco at that time? And he was like, oh, this woman knows who Harvey Milk was. And he was an out San Francisco councilman, the first out politician, and he was murdered. And he's a really important part of our history.
Right.
And so then I started talking to him about my wife, and not in a like, hey, by the way, I'm pansexual and I'm married and blah, 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 blah. Right. But just like, here's my life. And he was so grateful.
Yeah. I think, that's so powerful, in an environment where clearly you felt like you couldn't bring your whole self to work. It was difficult. You're talking about different generations. And I'm guessing this was like in the early 90s that these conversations were happening, or when you were working?
This was actually in the mid-aughts.
The mid-aughts. Okay. So even then, right? So, I mean, even, when we pat ourselves on the back of like, look at how far we've come in the 21st century, it would still, and I think definitely in assisted living communities where, there's intergenerations, right? Younger people working with older people to connect them to the healthcare and support that they need. And these are real conversations that are happening in LGBT spaces, right? Like organizations like SAGE, which advocates for aging LGBT folks. And the real concern for many of us having to look into our quote unquote golden years and having to go back into the closet because of home health aides and communities that just they're not where we want them to be in terms of accepting all of us, right? And you are going into the belly of the beast working there, and you're working with an older gentleman who gave you a safe word of like, maybe this woman seems like a safe person. I'm going to mention Harvey Milk and see how she responds. And there you go. You're off to the races and you're able to make a connection. And I think that the reality is that in a lot of workplaces, that kind of coded language still happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, like, you have this experience of working in a retirement assisted living facility, right? And you're on the path, you're doing the side hustle thing, you start your business. Clearly, you're bringing your whole self to your business, right? You're attracting the clients that appreciate all of you. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of the superpowers, right, that you bring to business because of your lived experience of being out, being a part of the LGBT community? I mean, do you think that there are superpowers? And if so, what are some of them?
Oh my gosh, I totally have my glittery cape on right now.
Yes, I love
my
it.
superhero
I love
cape is here. We have, as LGBTQ people, had the tremendous gift of learning a story. We have the gift of having looked at our lives and looking at our lives, as they move along and saying, who am I? Who am I? And in my work, that's like the deep question. Who am I and how am I going to do what I am most called to do? What is most valuable for me to do for myself and for others? So I think the simple act of coming to a place where you come out is a huge gift. Also, for those of us who, I was a member of the DC Radical Fairies Ladies Auxiliary when I lived in DC, and I've spent a lot of time with drag queens and a lot of time with genderqueer folks, a lot of time with non-binary folks, and trans folks of various stripes are quote unquote overrepresented among my clients. And part of that is about love. 3 of my ex-girlfriends are guys now. And living through transition, living with people who are going through various kinds of transition and learning how to talk about that in the 1990s.
Yes.
Yeah. And now. Mm-hmm. I've written about those relationships and people came and said, well, you seem like somebody who really combines an understanding of what my identity is about. And the last thing I would say is that I think queer people have always had a special, and this is not so much for everyone's business, but for mine, a bunch of special queer superpowers in terms of spirituality. We're the edgy people, the people who are on the edge spaces and who are the bridge builders and who are the bridges ourselves across traditions, across cultures, from the time of, ancient Sumer until now. Queer people have been central, controversial, and both held up and put down.
Yeah.
In spiritual traditions, and learning how to use that power is in fact a superpower, I think.
Yeah. So there were so many things to that. So I'm just going to kind of riff a little bit because I think it's important to underscore some of the points that you said. So just kind of the ability to know who you are, right? And I think in the work that you do as a spiritual expert, I guess, right, is like that's pretty central, right, to the human condition of like, who are we? Where did we come from? What's our purpose, right? I mean, when you really think about it, when you're alone at night, I mean, that's definitely where my thoughts go, right? I think to be queer, to be LGBT, however you identify in the rainbow family, right? That for all of us, we had to do some soul searching and a lot of explaining to people who don't always get it. And so I think that that's really valuable for you to share that, because I do think that crosses over into business, right? Like when you have to get clear about like you're starting out on your own, you have this thing, people don't quite get it, right? I'm sure people didn't really get what Steve Jobs was doing, and just having to explain again and again and having that confidence and that just being so sure of who you are I think that's huge, and it feeds into that coming out process that for so many of us we do all the time, again and again, right?
Again and again and again.
Yeah, but I think that you may be the first guest to talk about transition from the experience of an ally, so someone who's cisgender or not transgender, right? And just the value of going through that process with your lovers, with your partners, right? And then having to, I'm imagining having to advocate to other people who don't quite get your partners, what's happening, and to be able to explain something that it might be really complicated for someone who's cisgender who's never met someone who's transgender, and to be in that position in the 90s, right? Before we had YouTube and, just like the access of young people really breaking it down for everybody else, So I just want to kind of tip my hat to you. And also I love that you use that as a superpower that helps you in your business, right? Because I'm sure that as you explain the value of what you're doing, you have to break that down for people who might be shut down in one way or the other to think about their own spirituality. And I think especially for queer folks, because we've been so hurt, some of us have been so hurt by traditional religions, and that's not what you're about. But I'm sure people are automatically kind of body language, don't talk to me about spirituality. I don't want to talk about it. And I'm just curious, does that come up for some of the clients that you're working with in terms of how they think about their spirituality, which is, I get that that's different. I know enough to be dangerous to know that that's not about religion. But I'm curious, can you break this down for our guests, who many are within, obviously, LGBT communities, and some of whom might, I hope they've made it this far in this conversation, but they just might be shut down by the whole topic of spirituality. So how do you talk to people who might be a little shut down?
It's interesting. One of the things I talk about is, really on a basic level, that I work with and welcome agnostic and atheist clients.
Yeah.
That I have no investment in anyone's particular religious or spiritual identity, because guess what? They change.
Yep.
Somebody who is very connected to, we've seen over and over again, right? Folks who are very connected to evangelical communities who then reject religion and spirituality altogether because they were rejected first by those communities. And so one of the things I talk about is that I don't have an agenda for where someone is going to end up. Yes, I want to offer a space that can be healing for people, but I don't have an agenda about what their whole self looks like or what that healing looks like in them. I'm also a multi-faith person. I come out of a Roman Catholic background. I was rejected by my Roman Catholic community when I came out. I'm pagan. I'm an initiated Wiccan priestess, a Unitarian Universalist, and have been an ally and guest in African diaspora traditions, as well as in Jewish and Muslim communities. So I speak a lot of languages. Mm-hmm. My brother is an atheist Unitarian Universalist. I'm a multi-theist Unitarian Universalist. Wow.
And I feel like we're getting a world religions 101. You're breaking it down for us.
Well, I think that's really important to say, look, I don't have an agenda for where you are, but I hold a lot.
Yep.
And that is one of my personal superpowers in life.
Yeah.
It's that I can really hold a lot of paradox and ambivalence and ambiguity.
Yeah.
And that is something that is really important in my business.
Yeah. And you had said before, as a superpower, for some of us, we're bridge builders, or sometimes we are that bridge. And it just seems like that's what you're about. Kind of one of my takeaways of getting to know your business is you're open and you're welcome to all, and you're ready to work with people to kind of work through if they have spiritual blocks, right? Or if they're just interested in kind of deepening who they are and getting a better sense. And I think that's really smart. One thing that we didn't talk about before the sponsorship break was around culture. And so you had talked a little bit about working for other folks, and you had that great example of working for the assisted living program facility, right? And so I'm curious, like, it sounded like that culture wasn't the most inclusive, right? So what's maybe one thing that you're doing in your business right now? And I think it builds off of what we were just talking about, of how open you are to people. How do you signal to folks like, I'm welcoming, and I want to bring you in, and whether that's, I don't know if you're working with contractors or anything like that, or just with your own clients, like how do you kind of communicate what your inclusion ethos is?
Well, I do work with a couple of contractors who help me not only with the back end stuff of my business and my website and that kind of stuff, but who are also help me strategize. And one of them is queer too, and I knew it as soon as I met her online, and was like, yes, she's hired. I'm canceling these other interviews because she's awesome. And her name is Katie Takaoka, and she's amazing. But one of the things that I do is just ask people. When I talk about my work all the time, and not, I hope, in a really boring, like I'm constantly promoting something, but that word, like promotion can be sort of like a dirty word in ministerial context, right? In spirituality context. But again, one of the ways I signal is about what do I write about? I've written about fat ministry and being a fat femme in queer community on my blog and in my newsletter. And people have come to me who read one of my blog posts and have sent me a contact through my website and said, you are speaking to me, and I didn't even know I needed to be spoken to.
Nice.
So
I
don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, no, you are. And I actually, as you were saying it, you just ask people. And so I'm curious because, in the work that I do, when I'm not doing this podcast, I'm helping businesses try to be more inclusive, leveraging the diversity that they have within their organizations to make sure that it's really informing like where the broader business is going. And so oftentimes we're leaders who aren't quite where you're at, where they get stuck is that they get stuck in the abstractness of it, of like, in theory, they get, yes, we need to embrace inclusion. We need to make sure that our people feel that they belong, and we don't know how the heck to do it. And so like, what might be some examples, like when you say you just ask people questions, what are some of the questions that you ask?
One thing that I actually want to sort of pivot to is that people who are allies of LGBTQ folks, or wherever they are, as you say, in the rainbow family, because my clients are not all rainbow clients.
Right.
Some of them are cis het, not at all identified personally with LGBTQ identity. But I would venture to say that all of them are allies because they're working with me.
Yeah.
Or at least they have some concept of allyship. And so some of the questions that I ask people when I meet them or when I'm getting to know somebody, if topics like this have come up, I'll say, it sounds like you're doing a lot of spiritual work in your life right now. And do you think it would be helpful to have someone to meet with around accountability and companionship in that journey? Just straight up, just like, here's what I'm doing. Do you think it would be helpful? And if they say, I'm not really in that place right now, I don't think that that's something I need, I say, I would, I totally respect that. I'm not about pushing a big agenda on you, but if you meet someone who you think might benefit from talking with me, please just send them my way. Send them to thewayoftheriver.com and let them know that I'm here for them.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying too is just by being yourself and being out, even for people who aren't a part of the rainbow family, they want to work with you, right? And it's like, and they're attracted to what you're doing, and by supporting your business, like you said, it's it's the pathway to being, a bigger ally, and once they get to know you. So I think that's super, super helpful, just talking about some of the unique strengths of being LGBT in business. And Catherine, I wanted to end this part of the interview with just, considering some of the challenges that you outlined and or named and all of the awesome superpowers. I think you added just a ton of new ideas around, what makes us awesome in business. What would you want our listeners to take away to inspire them to be more authentic in their work, whether they're working for someone else or they just got started in their own business?
In our current political climate, I think sometimes what I'm going to say can feel more complicated than it did, 6 years ago. But I assume that people are going to behave themselves unless they show me otherwise. I talk about my wife. I'm very, very out. I'm out all the time, with the exception of that experience in CPE. And I think making the superpower of the being out story part of our businesses can just be huge, not only in terms of attracting other LGBTQ clients and business partners, but also showing them the hero's journey that we have been on to get where we are right now. And that everybody can be that hero. Everybody, no matter what their identity is and how it shifts and changes. Because again, guess what? It might. And that's okay. Yeah. And it's more than okay. It's something to celebrate. Everybody goes through the journey to the underworld, the places in the wilderness, the what folks call the dark night of the soul. And people who have gone through the process of saying, maybe I'm not who everybody thought I was when I was, born. Maybe I'm not that person. Maybe I'm more than that. Maybe there's more to me than that. And I think just that acknowledging that we're all heroes and that we all have a story is incredibly powerful. I mean, for copywriters and editors and web designers and all kinds of folks who want to get at how people are expressing their businesses.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. And it goes into being vulnerable, right? And just kind of putting forward the things that make you human. And it's hard, right? It's really hard to be vulnerable, especially, for business owners where we want to show that we're competitive and you want to work with us. And I think that when you lead with the vulnerability of what makes you human, it's more likely to draw in people of like, oh, I get what you're talking about. I've been there. And because you've shared that with me, I trust you.
Yes.
I think that's such valuable advice. And I really appreciate you sharing that.
I'd like to actually add to that really briefly, if I could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything in the world conspires for me to lead from my vulnerability in my personal story. Not only am I a fat femme, pansexual woman, I also have mental illness and I have bipolar disorder. Writing about that experience of being a minister with a mental illness is something that people come back to again and again and again and say, thank you so much for writing about that. Honestly, I've never seen anyone do that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And when people can say, I've never seen anyone do that, that's gold right there.
Yes. It is, right? Because it's loud and it's noisy when you go online, and to find something that is just truly like the feedback that you're getting, like, thank you for putting this out there because I'm there and I can't find anyone who has shown me a path of how to build a business and, to manage mental illness and, to be queer and, all of the things that you're putting out there to kind of really describe who you are. It goes back to, as well, the vulnerability, the hero's journey, and the fact that you'll never know like the true impact that you have on other people, especially when you're online. There's so many people that are coming across your work and are gaining such value from it. And this is just kind of like a sliver of the people who spent enough time just to give you, a couple lines to say, thank you so much for what you're doing. Keep going. Right. So I just think that that's like the ultimate validation. And it's awesome that you're getting that.
I just yesterday discovered that this new app called Our Bible app for believers of all stripes, specifically aimed at LGBTQ people, mostly Christian, but not entirely.
Mm-hmm.
I had submitted a reflection to them. Great. Yay. They took it. Woo.
Yeah. Congratulations.
And then the people who were looking at it went and looked for my other stuff and took other things, other reflections that I had written because they loved them, and they put them in there too. And I was like, okay, you're citing me. That's okay.
Yep.
But I was like, I would have liked to know that you did that, but thanks.
Yeah, right.
You know, like when you put your stuff out there, it's going to get out there.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that too alone, like whether or not you're telling your hero's journey, even like if you're just writing about your journey to get ordained, right? And you just feel like it's kind of run of the mill, or like everybody has this journey. I'm one of many. But it's the thing that you wrote. And as soon as you hit publish, there's the vulnerability just to that. The fact that like you're sharing so much of who you are and you're publishing it online, I think it's a leap of faith. And you're getting great feedback for doing that. And I just think that takes a lot of confidence, a lot of bravery, and you know, and it's great that you are helping so many people. So I wanted to touch on one, maybe two mindset questions before we jump into our bonus round. So mindset questions, I always like to kind of lead with at some point, and I know that it's not like necessarily linear, you know, it kind of ebbs and flows, but this feeling of the imposter complex, some people call it the imposter syndrome. It's the feeling of like, I don't know if I'm ready or if I'm good enough or if I can get started now. Can you tell me, did you experience that at all when you got started in your business? And
I have it all the time.
Yeah, right. So tell us about it. Yeah.
Somebody just asked me, like, what did she say? She was talking about, she's a person I know in business who is doing a workshop on how to do launches, right? Launch your class, launch your course series, whatever. And she was getting information from her clients, and I'm one of her clients. And she said, what keeps you from doing what you know you could do if you could do anything? And I said, being afraid I don't have anything valuable to say. And that is demonstrably false, right?
Yes.
I clearly have important things to say that resonate with people.
Yes.
It doesn't keep me from feeling like I don't know if I'm special enough or shiny enough or whatever. I have that feeling all the time, and I just write anyway. Just do it anyway.
I love it.
Every single Monday, my readers know that I will be in their inbox no matter what.
I love that. I mean, that kind of consistency too. People are counting on you, right? I mean, you're writing about things that are, you know, I mean, just in the example that you had already shared or around your hero's journey. I mean, that's super. I mean, you're being vulnerable again and again and again and again, showing up and knowing that kind of the imposter complex is it's gonna be there. It's kind of like your friend, you know. It's just like
exactly. There's a story about the Buddha that a demon of illusion, Maya, came and was trying to, like, you know, mess around with the Buddha. And the Buddha said, "Oh, hello, I see you. Come, sit, have tea." And so now sometimes I can say, "Oh, imposter syndrome. I see you. Come sit, have tea.
Yes.
I don't actually need your help right now, but here's some tea. I'm going to go right."
I love that. I love that. I mean, it's so true. And it's, you know, I mean, I've been doing this for a couple years now, and yeah, it's real and it's there. And I think just to acknowledge, like, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? I think for me, it's like, okay, you're around. I like the tea thing, so maybe I'll invite imposter for tea next time, you know. But it's like you got to keep doing what you're doing, and I think that feedback that you're getting is just, you know, more validation of like, no matter what, imposter complex, you're there or not, you know. It's you're supporting and you're really helping people. And I think that's amazing.
You're not going to hit it out of the park every time.
Yeah. And that's okay.
And you don't have to.
Yes.
Like perfectionism is evil.
Yeah. I get
Perfection, like for me, that's my big block in my ministry sometimes, is that I want to do it in my business. I want to do it now. I want to do it perfectly. I want to do it fast. It's not a fast process.
Yeah. I love that.
It's not.
Yeah.
And I can't show up every week expecting myself to be perfect, because then I just wouldn't show up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Progress, not perfection. So, okay. And I think we're ready to jump into a quick ad, and then we'll come back and go into our bonus round. Aspiring out bosses, are you struggling with taking that first entrepreneurial leap? Does the imposter syndrome prevent you from getting started? Have you considered seeking support, but you're just not sure where to turn? Look no further. The Out Entrepreneur now offers a coaching and mentorship program where you can access support and strategies to shift your mindset from employee to entrepreneur. If you're looking for accountability and a mentor who successfully busted out of the 9-to-5 lifestyle, let's schedule a time to talk today. Visit www.outentrepreneur.com and look for show notes from today's episode to schedule a call. Again, the URL is www.outentrepreneur.com. Together, let's welcome you to the wonderful world of being an out boss. All right, so we are back. So thank you, out bosses, for hanging with us during this episode. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into our bonus round to get a chance to get to know Catherine a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then learn one way that we can stay in touch with Catherine after today's conversation. So Catherine, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Quick fire questions. You'll just have to keep me from talking too much.
Okay. All right. I believe we can do this. Okay. So, do you have a mantra or a quote that you reference that helps you stay motivated in your business?
Discipline is remembering what you really want.
I love that. Can you share one personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
I write to myself in my journal longhand every day.
Name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at.
What I'm supposed to do when I'm supposed to do it.
Right? The to-do list, right?
My people, Katie and Jillian, meet with me on Monday and give me my marching orders, and I do them.
Nice. I love that. It sounds like you're surrounded by good people, which
I'm very lucky. And I'll be honest too, like, that's an expense that I decided, okay, it's going to be worth it, but it's not. It's the most expensive thing I have.
Yeah.
It's help.
Yeah.
But it's been totally worth it.
It allows you to do more of what you're good at. So, okay, so 2 more questions for you. Can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of out bosses to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
Don't be afraid to share who you really are.
Yes, the hero's journey. I think you've named this episode, right? So, Catherine, thank you so much for your time and for inspiring fellow out bosses. Can you let us know one way that we can stay in touch with you and learn more about your business?
Absolutely. The easiest way to stay in touch with me is to go to thewayoftheriver.com. Don't forget the. That's thewayoftheriver.com. And click on Love Letters. And you'll receive my every single Monday, I promise. And you can read it or not. Email in your inbox. It's not very long, but it always has a spiritual boost for you.
I love that. And I said when I first outreached to you that we're going to do this interview that I would sign up, and I have not done it yet, but I am signing up for that because who doesn't want a love letter on Monday morning, right?
I think so.
So that's my homework over the weekend, but I'm definitely going to do that. So for Out Bosses, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring out bosses like Catherine. So for details from today's conversation, to find out where you can get those love letters, check out the show notes at www.outentrepreneur.com. As a next step, subscribe to the podcast, consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes, and be sure to share with a friend or a loved one. And for now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.